Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another broadcast of the Lawrence Report. On tonight's broadcast, we will be discussing episode 6 of Lawman Bass Reeves. Now, I gotta give a huge shout out to the cast, the crew, and the director. I just read this article right here from Deadline saying that Lawman Bass Reeves becomes the year's most watched series premiere at Paramount Plus. So for me, my fingers are crossed that, we will be getting a season 2 renewal of Lawman Bass Reeves. This episode right here is definitely one of my favorites. But there's one particular scene and one storyline was definitely my favorite. I'll discuss that. We are coming off the heels of episode 5 of Lawman Bass Reeves and coming to episode 6, and we see that Bass Reeves and Billy Crow, they're finally able to transport Jackson Cole. But we see an old friend of Bass Reeves. Well, he's probably not a friend, more like an enemy, basically. Esau. He is also, he has the badge, kind of like how Bass Reeves has a badge now. So while Bass and Esau are talking, Esau can see in Bass' eyes that, he really hates him. And, because they go back, their beef goes all the way back to episode one through three of the series, right? And, they are talking about, the weight of the badge. And Esau is like, well, this badge comes with a lot of power. But Bass is like, well, it's also about the heart, that you have that heart and do the right thing while you with the badge. Because we see a lot of times people who hold these badges, even in today's lifetime, we see people abuse the power, right? And, Bass tells Esau that, Jackson Cole is a good man. I mean, Esau's like, well, are you sure about that? Did he tell you everything that he done? And Esau goes in detail, to tell Bass about what Jackson Cole has done when it came to him killing this political guy who was running for office. Jackson unfortunately did some very, very bad things to this man. And, you know, Bass is like, well, can you promise me that, this man would get a fair and speedy trial? He's like, Esau's like, well, he's my prisoner now, and, I'll do the best I can, but I can't make no promises. It seems like for Esau, he is basically the judge, the jury, and the executioner. But we'll see why those three things that I just mentioned mean so much later on as we go on. So then, uh, Billy Crow's like, listen, we've been riding for so long. I'm tired. Like, let's take a break. Like, we need to, recharge our batteries, for the lack of better terms, right? So Bash, he ends up going into this bar. He's kind of stressed out. The weight of the bad just kind of, weighing him down, for a lack of better terms. And Billy Crow runs into his old friend, this woman who was a prostitute. Her name is Callista. And Billy Crow is completely, sprung. Billy is in love with this girl. And, they end up going back to her place. And, he wants to marry her. But she's like, well, you can't afford me, basically. And they end up doing what they do, right? So Billy is just completely head over heels for this woman. But, his boy, Bass, is in this bar taking these shots of whiskey, trying to drown his problems, right? And there's this man that is talking so loud, it kind of gets on Bass' nerves. So Bass bumps into him on purpose, basically tell him to, you may want to, cool your tone down. There's other people in here besides you. And it looks like those two are about to get it on, and it's about to fight, right? But this man, who is a Texas Ranger himself, his name is Braxton Sawyer, and, he shows his badge to Bass, and they both, pretty much have like a badge off, and he's like, well, okay, I didn't know you was, that high ranking, nice to meet you, Bass Reeves. I heard about you throughout this territory. I know you're a nice man. You know what? Let me buy you a drink. So they don't end up beefing, actually, and they end up confiding. Well, Bass ends up confiding into this man. Bass is like, this badge is weighing more than I thought it was going to be. Sometimes I don't even know that there is a God out there. Like, am I really doing the right line of work? And, Sawyer tells him, Bass, there is a God out there, and he is pleased with the work that you're doing. And, the man goes up on his merry way, and Bass, he takes another shot, but he sees these people, right? There's like this woman and I think two or three more men that were with her, right? And again, Bass is drunk as a skunk, basically. So he's not necessarily all the way there, right? So Bass, he decides to leave the building. He goes outside, to use the bathroom. And there's a woman who is, the same group of people I told you about earlier. There's a woman who says, you know what, that's the man right there that took down Jim Webb. So I'm assuming these are some of Jim Webb's friends, right? So Bass is turning around. He's kind of outnumbered. It's like 5 or 6 dudes and this female that's leading the charge. And they end up jumping Bass. Bass is like, well, where was you at earlier when I was looking for a fight? Basically saying was I was kind of in my straight mind then, but now, I'm kind of drunk and hungover. And, they outnumber Bass and they take him down. And, the woman talks about the bounty that is clearly on Bass's head, that the bounty is, we can take you alive or dead. And they have this gun and they all, well, it was actually three people. They end up taking shots at Bass, but the gun is not fully loaded, right? And, while they're beating up on Bass, the third man, he tries to take a shot at Bass as well, but he's not so lucky. So Billy Crow, he finally leaves this room where him and the prostitute was at, and because they hear all the noises going on the outside, and they come out. Well, Billy Crow comes out. He ends up shooting this man right here, and the rest of the guys they end up escaping. So now Billy Crow and Bass are looking for these people, and they do end up capturing all of them. I think one of the funniest scenes is I saw two of the people. I think they was dressed as females, but Billy Crow figured out that they were actually males, and they end up capturing the woman as well. And Bass team up with Billy Crow, and they do what they need to do. They bring those guys. So back on the farm, we see Arthur and Sally, right? So Arthur tells Sally that Bass Reeves' daughter that I gotta leave town. She's like, well, why you gotta leave town? And she's like, well, those white boys that we beat up, they're gonna come looking for me. And she's like, well, I didn't expect you to be a chicken. I didn't expect you to run away. And he's like, well, everybody's last name isn't Reeves, right? So this guy, Arthur, I'm like, well, he even says, well, won't you run away with me? Like, we can go to Paris. I'll write you poems. I'll feed you grapes and all this stuff. I'm lying about the grapes part. But, I'm like, bro, you're a kid. How you get money to escape to Paris? Like, do you even have a job, bro? That's what I'm thinking in my mind, as I'm seeing this right here. But, Sally stays her ground. She's like, if you want to run, that's cool. But he does give her ultimatum. He's like, well, I'll be at this place at a certain time if you decide to, run with me. Because the situation was, there's this little racist white girl, at this carnival that they was at. She ends up getting her brothers, I think it was her brothers or somebody like that, to, fight Sally and Arthur. And this right here was my favorite scene right here for so many ways right here. So Edwin and SMA, they end up coming over to Bass Reeves' house for dinner, right? And Edwin, I'm pretty sure it was a mistake. He sits at the head of the table, right? Most men always sit at the head of their table, right? And the goal is to get Bass to join them on this mission of, building this black utopia, right? Bass comes home, but he's kind of beat up, bruised up, kind of has, it looks like a broken jaw at the same time, right? And he comes home, he's like, well, who is this man, sitting in my chair? And Edwin, introduces himself. He says, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get off on the wrong foot. I'll slide down. My bad, bro. I did not mean it like that. And, Edwin is talking about, there's somebody out here that is killing black people, black men for sport. And we don't know who this person is. And I feel that it's up to us to build our own black utopia. Kind of like when I think about black utopias, I think about Atlanta, for an example. And if we want to go into the sci-fi realm, I think about Black Panther, Wakanda, right? These are black utopias where it's basically, a bunch of black folks. Of course, in Atlanta, they do have white people as well. But when we think about Atlanta, a lot of times we think about black people, right? So Edwin's like, yo, Bass, are you really having fun doing this? I mean, Judge Parker basically writes your bullets, right? He tells you who you need to go capture. If you join us on this vision, on this futuristic quest, you can be your own man. Your name, Bass Reeves, holds so much weight, not only in the black community, but throughout the territory, right? And Bass is like, I'm supposed to be a man of all people, not just black people, but, white people, red, which he calls Native American. Um, you know, I have to bring justice to all people. I'm a man of the people, all people, not just for black people. And Edwin was like, bro, I get it, but this utopia I'm trying to build, I need you with me. And Bass is like, about that. Bass ends up asking Edwin, have you ever felt the lash? Basically, he's saying, have you ever got whipped? And Edwin was like, no. And Bass is like, well, I felt it. And of course, it don't feel good, right? But, for Edwin, he's like, listen, what I'm trying to build for us, you will never have to worry about a lash or anything of that nature right there. So that's why I said this right here was, one of my favorite parts of this video right here. So things at the dinner table doesn't go as well planned as Edwin and Esme, hope, right? So they end up leaving. And later that night, Bass is taking off his clothes and, getting ready. Well, I thought he was getting ready to get a bath, but he says, you can run my bath order in the morning. His wife, she never notices these bruises, on his side. She's like, as you continue to do these bounties and you go out, I'm seeing less and less of the man that I fell in love with. Like, what happened to that fire, the passion, the light that was once in your eyes? Sometimes I feel like I don't even know you. And I think she ends up asking, where is my husband? Like, I want the old Bass Reeves. So the next day, Bass is, getting ready to collect his check, and he realizes that he is $50 short. Apparently, we do find out that Esau killed Jackson Cole, after Bass turned him over. And he claimed that, Esau claimed that, as, Cole was turned over, that he was already dead. Like, that's how he received him, right? And, that's basically how we find out that, this man Esau is not truly who we think he is, right? So Bass ends up, while he's in the jail area, he ends up going to talk to Ramsey, like he's like, yo, Ramsey, who is Mr. Sundown? Who is Mr. Sundown? And he sings a song that he's been singing throughout the whole series. It goes, Ride by Night, or something like that, he says, right? And, from there, he mentions these key words right here. He said, Mr. Sundown is Cinco Peso. Cinco Peso is Mr. Sundown. So the Dollar Boys and Ramsey, they now both are about to get hung. And, as Ramsey is getting ready to get hung, he tells, about the peso situation. And, for Bass, he starts to put two and two together that, Mr. Sundown is actually Esau. We come to the ending of the episode where Bass looks like he's standing in his kitchen. He's drinking water. And, there is a man whispering in his ear, or a devil whispering in his ear, putting all the pieces together. Bass is realizing that this guy right here who holds the badge is 100%. He's got to be Mr. Sundown. And that is how the episode ends. So now I think, yeah. So it's Esau. It may have been Esau. He's the one that's hunting down black men, black people, and taking justice into his own hands. So, yeah. So this was a lot to handle. This was right here was a lot to handle, but man, how's Bass going to do this? How can he take down someone that's wearing the badge just like him. The cards are going to be stacked against Bass Reeves for sure. If you're watching this, please let me know. Please feel free to comment as well. And I would love to hear your thoughts about, Bass Reeves. Like I said, there's a lot that's going on in my mind right now about this episode. But yeah, and as always, thank you for tuning in to the Lawrence Report.